Oregon, Ohio State meeting up in the Rose Bowl, Pasadena, California. It's a West Coast trip. January 1st, New Year's Day, 5 p.m. Ohio State is now a 2.5 point favorite. Over under has ticked up to 55.5. It opened up at 53.5, stayed at 54.5 there for a minute. And now, as I said, up to 55.5. So people are expecting more scoring. We talked about this one last week, Mason. I mean, we've already seen this matchup this year, and that it eclipsed this 55-point mark. So obviously, Vegas is feeling as though the defenses are going to be able to step up in this game, or one or the other defenses are going to step up in this game. Um, we saw very similar performances, I felt like, from each team in the first game. I think both defenses left a little bit to be desired in those games, and I think both teams feel as though they might be a little healthier, maybe a little more prepared to handle these offenses the second go around here. I've seen both fan bases kind of comment in that same sentiment. Um, both teams had both offenses had about 500 total yards last time, so it was almost 1,000 total yards in this game. We saw the offenses go up and down the field. Ohio State had turned the ball over a couple of times in that first matchup, had some special teams blunders, things like that. So I'm expecting to see a cleaner game from Ohio State, Mason. I mean, look, we talked about the Tennessee matchup 10 days ago. We were dead wrong on that. We were on the Tennessee side of things. Um, we get to the game, and Tennessee's best player isn't even playing in the game. He had one snap. I really wish we would have figured that out beforehand, but I don't know that it would have mattered because the Ohio State team that showed up in the shoe that night, I don't know that anybody in the country would be able to beat that team, Mason. They looked that good. So it begs the question: can Ohio State replicate what they did this past playoff game against Tennessee? Because, like I said, I think that team right there, if they show up like that, they're just going to be hard to beat. We talked
Mhm.
about how Tennessee approached that football game. I felt like Tennessee had their eyes set on stopping the run, and Ohio State called the plays right every single time they did it, Mason. They got those wide receivers on an island. They made those cornerbacks stay on an island, one on one, and Ohio State won the 50-50 balls. It's that simple. They were more explosive, and not to mention the defense has looked better and better as the years went on. I mean, we can talk about Ohio State losing to Michigan all we want to. It wasn't the defense's fault. I mean, you can't put that at the feet of the defense. It was the offense's fault. It's very, very clear. That was the best the offense has looked, I think, all year, right? Can they keep it going into this matchup in the rematch against Oregon? What are your thoughts?
I don't think that Ohio State's going to have nearly as effective of a game plan against Oregon as they did against Tennessee, mainly because I think that Oregon is the best offense in the country right now. Since they've had the return of Tess Johnson in this offense, I think that they're the best offense in the country. Tennessee in the game against Ohio State, they were completely outclassed and outmatched on with Tennessee's offense versus Ohio State's defense. They were not prepared. Nico is an inexperienced quarterback. He's a redshirt freshman. That's not what Dylan Gabriel is, and I think that is huge. It's a huge factor in this football game. You're going to see that be the reason, in my opinion, that Oregon puts up a pretty hefty number on offense. Now, the question is, can Ohio State also score with Oregon? And I really, looking at this game, I went back and watched the first game. I think it's going to play out very similar. I think that both of these offenses are going to have opportunities to score. I like the over here as a play. And to me, when I look at both of these offenses in comparison to when they played in the middle of the season, I think that they've both gotten better. Now, Ohio State has shown they've really flexed their muscles defensively throughout the season. And Oregon is coming off of a game where a Penn State offense that is behind Ohio State's offense, I would say. I think that's pretty fair to say. We saw them give up a ton of points to Penn State. So, what are we going to get out of the Oregon defense? That to me is the question, more so than the Ohio State defense. I think they've been playing great. They've been consistent, and I think that's gonna really matter. But when you look at Oregon, if you go back to the beginning of the year, they had some issues with the offensive line. I mean, some glaring issues, issues that I didn't think that they would be able to fix, and they did. They changed some things up on the offensive line, really just before the Ohio State game, and they've been absolutely rock solid ever since that moment. Right on the offensive side of the football, as the offensive line goes, the offense goes. That can be said about any team in college football, right? And any team in football in general. They seem to have figured out the right mix of dudes up front, and that's going to be huge in this game because I think that the Ohio State defensive line has gotten better as the year has gone on. We really saw them be disruptive against Tennessee. However, I think Oregon's offensive line is much better than Tennessee's. Tennessee's had issues in pass protection in particular, throughout the season, and it showed up in the biggest game possible. So, does Ohio State the question being, does Ohio State have the ability to replicate what they did against Tennessee? Yeah, I think that they do. I just feel like even if they play at that level, Oregon's still going to have opportunities to score. Um, Tez Johnson is going to have his opportunities to get some yards. I think Trayshawn Holden, assuming he doesn't spit on a player in this game, which I don't think he does. Um, I think he learned his lesson. I think that he could be a factor in this football game, seeking a little bit of redemption after he went out in the first half of that first one. We all remember that. And then Evan Stewart was a big factor in this game the first time around. It was kind of a coming out game for Evan Stewart in the Ducks uniform. He really hadn't done anything up until that point, and he had a big game. So to me, it's going to be the passing attack for Oregon, getting them going. You got to complement it with the run game. Both teams ran for just under 150 yards in the first matchup. I think that I think that will be similar in this one. Maybe you get a couple of chunk plays from either side, and maybe that ends up being the difference in the football game. But I really feel like these two teams are very evenly matched. When you look at Oregon's defense versus Ohio State's, I think Oregon plays a little bit faster, whereas Ohio State's is a bit more physical. Oregon's defense, to me, is a little bit more opportunistic, almost like a finesse defense in a way. You don't really hear that. You hear finesse more on the offensive side of the football than defense, but I really do feel like the skill position players are really good for Oregon, and they're very opportunistic. We saw in the first game where I believe it was Terrence, if I'm not mistaken, stripped the ball from Quinshon Judkins on a tackle. I mean, they're just looking for the football. I think you see that a lot in this game as well. And look, this to me it could go either way. I really do feel like they are that evenly matched, and I'm I'm probably going to lean Oregon again in this one. But as far as you know the matchup goes, I think these two teams are very. I mean, you're splitting hairs between the two of them. This is probably the most competitive um, game that we're going to see this week, and I absolutely cannot wait for it, Mark.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm super excited about this one. This is one of the toughest games to pick of the week. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I don't have any qualms with anybody picking either side of this thing. I'm going to give you my prediction here in just a minute, but just wanted to go through some of the comments. There was a lot. I don't know, 8,000 or something like that views on that video from earlier this week or at the end of last week. I can't even remember at this point. With the holidays, all my days are running together. I don't even know what day of the week it is anymore. But I had some interesting comments. We'll read some of them and just kind of talk about it. Craig Klein, thank you so much for watching. I certainly do appreciate it. Ohio State, first in scoring defense, sixth against the rush, first against the pass, first in total defense, sixth in red zone defense. Oregon ranks in the top 10 of just one of those categories. They are ninth in total defense in yards per game. Ohio State's defense has gotten better each week. They have the best defense in America. Oregon's defense is decent. Buckeyes' defense will be the difference. And I thought this was interesting because I do somewhat agree with this sentiment. I do think obviously this is one of the best defenses in the country. And I like what you said about their physicality, Mason, because that's something that pops out to you, to the eye whenever you watch them. They are extremely physical, specifically the front seven there, very, very physical. And you got some safeties that will absolutely come down and hammer your ass. So they're ultra talented, all just loaded, no doubt about it. But what I think that's been the difference this year, Mason, and whenever we saw this matchup the first time, this comment kind of reminded me of it. This defense for Ohio State, it seemed like they really kind of just sat back and almost like throw your best punch and then we'll react to it. And while I kind of respect that mentality, I understand what they were doing. Oregon's too good of an offense to do that. You can't let them dictate this football game because if Oregon is able to dictate the football game offensively, you're going to play their game all day. And I don't know that Ohio State is the type of team that beats Oregon at that finesse style, track meet style game here, right? I expect Ohio State to bring the pressure in this one, Mason. I fully expect to see some blitz. We just didn't see it a ton early in the season, and I think that's something that's going to change in this game. I don't think you see a conservative approach at all from this defense, and I think that they're going to be able to create some pressure and create some tougher looks than they did in that first matchup there. Um, any thoughts on that or on this?
Yeah, I keep going back and forth because again, this game's razor thin. Um, I do think both defenses throughout the year have gotten better. I think Oregon is healthy now with Jordan Birch playing at close to 100%. The extra rest certainly couldn't hurt in this football game. Maybe you do see the defenses step up on both sides of the football here. Um, I think Derek Harmon, which is the player I was trying to think of who had the strip sack earlier, I think Derek Harmon has really come on as of late. I think you see a lot of Tuioti, who's kind of that second jack linebacker behind Uyunglele. He plays extremely fast. He's very long, can kind of bend and get to the quarterback. I think you see him going up against an offensive line, which we need to remember is banged up for Ohio State. They're more banged up than they were in the first matchup, right? And Oregon had some success against that starting offensive line, and so maybe they get to the quarterback a few more times in this one. I do think I do think now, kind of looking at it, maybe this is a little bit of a lower scoring game, barring some turnovers and whatnot. But I still like Oregon in this one. I think that they're a little bit too fast. I like them to win. Obviously, that would mean that they cover the points as well. And I like the under in this game.
Uh, State your name. Thanks for watching. I certainly do appreciate it. He says Tennessee was so bad, my high school could have beat them. We really got to stop acting like Ohio just smashed the Chiefs or something. Will it be a difficult game? Absolutely. But I'm tired of people acting like Oregon should be the ones worried. I appreciate you again watching State Your Name. I just thought this one was kind of funny and just kind of descriptive of the attitudes on each side of this thing. Oregon fans feel slighted, and we kind of touched on this throughout the season. Oregon is the only team that made it through the season undefeated. And there was a whole lot of talk this season about how there's no elite teams this year, and Oregon fans took it personally because how could you go undefeated in a year where nobody goes undefeated if you're not elite? And I think there's something to be said for that. And I think I think that's why Oregon fans were so quick to jump on the message boards in the chat and things like that and say, "Hey, you guys are not you're not giving us our due here." Um, Oregon's had an amazing season. Ohio State just played their best ball. Let's see what happens with it. Um, there was another comment I wanted to get to, and there was a bunch of comments I really wanted to get to. Well, maybe we'll talk about that here at the end of this segment. But boy, the Ohio State fans were on our ass this past week. We'll talk about that more here in a second. Um, Sir General, thanks for watching. Buckeye fan here. One thing for certain and two things for sure. Not only did Ohio State get better since the first meeting in 2024, but Oregon did also. And I think there's a little bit of something to be said for that. I mean, I think
Yeah.
Oregon, um, th- they're like every team has dealt with some injuries. So I think having a rest like Oregon has had has probably been a good thing for their ball club. I would imagine probably a little bit healthier than they were before the break started. Um, and I certainly feel like Ohio State is playing better. I wouldn't say playing better, but I think the defense has got a better identity, a better idea of what they are wanting to do defensively than what they did in the beginning of the season. And we obviously just saw the best performance by the offense. Um, do we see more of that? We just got to see more. And there was one comment here that kind of ties into this. I don't know if I put it on here, but it was talking about. I don't think I put it on here, so we'll just kind of introduce it ourselves here and talk about it. But it was talking about the quarterbacks in this situation, Mason. So let's kind of talk about Will Howard versus Dylan Gabriel. Obviously, they're not going to face off against one another. They're going to face each other's defenses, but Will Howard, we've seen in big games not play so well. I mean, that's kind of just a fact. And we've seen Dylan Gabriel, I would say, play some of his best ball in the most important moments. Um, I think there's a clutch factor with Dylan Gabriel here. I'm not sure that it is the difference in this game. I think there's a pretty good possibility both quarterbacks are ready here and play decent or play well. But if you're asking me to pick between the two, I'm taking Dylan Gabriel with his ability to be mobile. I think that's going to come into play here a good bit. Uh, I just look back and I think back to Oklahoma beating Texas last year, right? And what Dylan Gabriel was able to do in that moment. I mean, the pressure doesn't really get much higher. The stage doesn't really get much bigger. I guess it is technically a little bit bigger in this scenario, but I mean, he won that. He really won that game for Oklahoma. Um, uh, and Oklahoma defense played pretty well in that game as well. But Oklahoma, we see what their team is at this point, right? They just lost the Navy the other day. What a disgrace. Um, Dylan
Just lost
Gabriel's
their
out there
defensive
beating Texas with
coordinator
that
as
team.
well.
What's that?
Said just lost their defensive coordinator as well, who was Brent Venables' protege, and he goes to be the defensive coordinator at West Virginia. Um, that I think that smells like a dumpster fire over there, but not to get off topic.
Yeah, I mean, it's starting to appear as though he may just not know what the hell he's doing. Um, Unfortunately, because he's a great defensive mind. But you're right. That's another discussion for another video. What do you think about the quarterbacks in this situation? And it sounds like you're on Oregon on this one. Um, just your final thoughts and predictions, and what do you think about these two quarterbacks matching up? A couple of guys that were prominent quarterbacks before they got to their school this past year. So we're really seeing the transfer portal leave its mark on history at this point, as both of these guys were transfer guys that left schools they were not doing as well to contenders, and here they are in the quarterfinals of the college football playoff in 2024.
Yeah, well, I got to say that Will Howard has really impressed me as the season's gone on, not just with his stats or the throws he's making or the decisions he's making, although all of those things have gotten better. I think the confidence that I've seen from him in the past couple of weeks is starting to show and it's starting to emanate throughout the football team, throughout the offensive side of the football as well. He's really been targeting Jeremiah Smith a lot more. I think that he has kind of taken over as the feature wide receiver and kind of supplanted Emeka Egbuka as well in that role. A lot of the things that I thought I thought that Will Howard would have success at Ohio State. And he's starting to show me the things that I thought I would see out of him in his intangibles as a leader, as a fiery quarterback. Like, I really love to see a quarterback that gets pumped up when another player on the offense makes a play, or he makes a play, or the defense makes a play. It seems like the camera is always catching him in a moment where he's the one on the sideline pumping his fist, and almost like a coach, how a coach should feel about his players performing well. That's what I'm seeing out of Will Howard, and that's something we didn't see throughout a lot of the, or I don't want to say throughout most of the year, but at times it seemed like if he was in his head about how the game was going, in particular in that Oregon game the first time around, I didn't see as much fire from him. Now he's playing with confidence. I do think that that gives him a little bit of an advantage that he didn't have in the first go round. But looking at Dylan Gabriel, you're absolutely right. He is the most experienced quarterback in college football right now, in my opinion. Like, he's been in the big games, he's played in the SEC. Well, I guess he didn't play in the SEC technically because Oklahoma wasn't in the SEC yet, but he's played in a lot of big games. This is his third team that he's played with. He is a journeyman through and through, right? And he he has the edge from an experience factor. He could, when we saw it in the first matchup, where we saw, I think it was Oregon's first or second touchdown. I can't remember now, but he runs for like 15 yards on a design passing play. Didn't see anybody open. He decides to scamper, gets in the end zone, finds himself in the end zone. Do we see more of that? Those sort of key decision making, that those abilities that he has, that could be the difference in this football game. I thought we were ending the segment earlier, Mark, so I gave you my prediction, but I'm still leaning Oregon. I think that they did win this football game, and also I'll add to this. As of right now, I think whoever wins this football game wins the national championship. Until one of the other six teams shows me something different, I'm picking whoever wins this football game to win the national championship. I do think that there's that much on this football game. And to me, that's Oregon right now. I think that they've been sort of the standard of college football throughout this season. And I think that that continues. Dan Lanning will have his best coaching moment on the biggest stage. Ryan Day's seat gets even harder, even though they've had an excellent season. But the seat will get even harder for him, and Dan Lanning will be kind of talked about among the goats of college football at this moment after this football game.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a really good one. Um, Guys, I'm not betting anything on this game. If I bet anything, it's going to be on the over under, and I think I would bet the under. But I'm probably going to wait. I'm going to let these numbers keep going up. I think the defenses do play better in this game than they did in the first matchup. Both defenses, and um, man, this is just a tough one to call because I completely agree with you, Mason. I think this is an early preview for national champion. I think whoever can get past this speed bump has got the leg up in the national championship. I think these are the two teams that have the best odds to win the national championship, and I think
No,
right
actually,
right
Texas is number one, believe it or not.
that doesn't make a damn bit of sense to me. But
I
I'm
agree.
not Vegas, so Texas has got issues, and I think either one of these teams would beat Texas by a touchdown. So um, we'll see. We'll see what happens. One of these teams is probably going to get their chance to face off against Texas because the winner will proceed on in that direction. So, going to be a good one. Let us know in the comment section what you think about this one, Ohio State fans, Oregon fans alike. And if you would like to, if you're interested in it, please hit the subscribe button and come and hang out with us. We've got tons more college football to talk about to finish out the season. And then we'll have a very short off season leading into spring ball. Can't wait to talk about it all year with you guys. Thank you so much.